Welcome to the next segment of this week's multi-part video. In the last segment we talked about why you want to catch live bait. In this segment we're going to talk about what sort of live bait you can catch on a sabiki. Before we get into it, I'll just mention that any size or possession limits that I mentioned in the video are current for Queensland at the time I recorded the video. They may vary in other states or jurisdictions, and they may change over time. It is up to you to check your local ordinances and make sure that you comply. Yakkas are a great bait species. I really like them. I prefer a smaller hook size for them on the sabiki rig, something around no bigger than an 8, maybe down to even a 12. So you can take from that 10 is probably a good compromise. Slimy Mackerel is another good bait, and for them I like around about an 8 or a 10 hook size. Herring are another great live bait, and for them I'd take anything from a 6 to probably an 8 or a 10 in hook size. Herring make a really good bait for snapper and other fish. Their drawback is that they're a bit delicate. They don't like being handled at all. They lose scales very easily, and once you handle them they die fairly quickly. So I try not to handle any herring at all until I have to put it on the hook, and hopefully it gets eaten before it dies from being handled. The Bony Bream's a member of the herring family that I haven't actually caught for live bait, but if I ever do catch any I'm going to give it a go, just because it is a member of the herring family, and I expect it should be just as good as any other herring. Pike is another exceptionally good bait. It's really good for jewfish and snapper. I have caught them on a sabiki rig, but I generally catch them as bycatch when I'm looking for something else. When I went out whiting fishing the other week, I caught a few pike. And one time when I was trying some lure fishing, looking for whiting or flathead, all I caught was pike. But I get most of my pike of a night time with the lights on the boat, and they come up behind the boat and I can just throw a lure out and catch them one at a time. The smaller pike last really well in the live bait tank, but the larger pike tend to expire by morning, catch them at night. So you need an aerator, or you need to leave your pump going. If you've got a pump that will run continuously, have the water flush through all night to keep the oxygen in the water. The small ones will live through the night, no trouble. Large ones, not so much. And winter whiting are another great bait. They're great as live bait. I haven't targeted whiting for a long time. First time I targeted it was the last fishing trip. I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I will be doing more of it. I do like a whiting fillet. They're a really nice eating fish. For winter whiting, keep a feed by all means, but any of the really small ones, stick them in your live well and use them for snapper bait, provided you're not in the middle of the closed season. It makes great snapper bait. And the ones you do take home, you fill it up to eat, keep the whiting heads, because even the heads make good snapper bait. It's not as good as live bait, but it's not too bad. And because there's no size limit, it's okay to keep the small ones for live bait. Just remember that your live bait counts in your possession limit of 50 fish. Bonito is another great bait. I generally use it as a slab bait when I catch them. I just slice a fillet off and cut it up for slab bait. I know they're great as a whole bait or a live bait for Spanish mackerel and wahoo and the like. I haven't heard anything about them being used as a snapper bait. I think the big ones would be too big, but a jewfish would take it, I guess. So if you've got some live bonito around, worth dropping it over to try if you're in an area where you're going to get jewfish, for sure. There's even been some Spanish mackerel caught on Harry's, so again, probably worth dropping it there. The worst that can happen is a shark will take it instead. Of the other species that I've used for bait, there's Garfish, Longtoms and Poddy Mullet. I used to catch Longtoms off the big boat. I'd shine a light over the side of a night time and they'd come up to look at the light and I'd shoot them with a bow and arrow. That's the way I used to get squid back in the day as well. Of course that meant they weren't live bait. I just took a fillet off and used them as strip bait, but they worked pretty well. I imagine they'd work pretty well as a live bait, but I haven't tried them for that. Garfish I've caught on a float rig with a little bit of prawn on it or worm or anything that fish eat really. Just a tiny little bit on the end of a very small hook with a float rig and have the hook down. I usually start around 1 metre. Have to adjust it to whatever depth they're at. I have been told you can catch them on a sabiki rig, although I've never caught any on a sabiki rig, so I can't testify to that personally, but I have been told they can be caught. Also Poddy Mullet. Now, I've never caught mullet on any sort of line. You can cast net them. I've never cast netted them, but I have netted some off a beach, just walking the net out around in a circle and coming back to the beach and dragging them in. I've got some there. But again, I've been told that you can catch them on a Sabiki rig, so I guess it's possible. I've just never done it. But if you do catch any of those species, I'd be using them for live bait for sure. Although I have to say the garfish is a bit of a toss-up. They're really nice eating as well, so a bit of a toss-up whether you use them for bait or eat them. If they're big enough, I'd be keeping them to eat and maybe use the small ones for bait. And that's covered the main bait species that you're going to catch around the bay or even close in offshore. All of them make great bait. Apart from the pike and the bonito, you shouldn't have any problem mixing them up if you're using a net over the side, as I'll talk about a little bit later as a method of keeping your bait alive.